Hey, welcome everybody from the Brand Storytelling Network community and the Purpose-Driven Brand Storytelling Certification course. I'm Stephen Marshall, and I'm not going to talk very much. I want to get right to it because we've got an amazing interview conducted by our faculty member, Sarah Colamarino, with Ranjay Gulati from the Harvard Business School. And Professor Gulati is the Paul R. Lawrence MBA Class of 1942 Professor of Business Administration. That is a mouthful. And the former unit head of the organizational business unit and former chair of the advanced management program at Harvard Business School. In 2022, he just released an amazing book that you need to read entitled Deep Purpose. And that's a big part of what we're talking about today. It's really the superpower of successful companies. And I'm just going to turn it over to Professor Gulati and to Sarah to take this on. So thank you so much for joining us and being a part of this amazing conversation.
Great. And thank you for allowing me to be the interviewer. I feel privileged to have the opportunity to talk to you. I've followed your work for many years. So
thank you, Sarah.
So start by telling us what made you explore deep purpose? What did you see? Why did you do this?
So Sarah, if you told me 5 years ago even that I'd write a book about purpose or deep purpose, I would have said you're crazy. Not a chance. I mean, I study business, I study serious things, I study unlocking organizational performance. And how do you unlock organizational performance? You build a good strategy and you implement the strategy. That was kind of a model that I had baked in my head. And as I got older, I was studying more implementation and less kind of strategy stuff, but I was really about strategy implementation and the two coming together. And purpose was kind of like a mission statement. I mean, like, who reads mission statements? Really? I mean, come on. And it was really kind of a discovery process for me through my students. I was chairing a program called the Advanced Management Program here, where we have senior leaders coming from all over the world. They were challenging me on this topic. I had my own introspections. I started to see pockets of companies and academics talking about it, but it was still a fringe thing. Purpose was Ben & Jerry's, Patagonia, Whole Foods, one or two here and there. It wasn't and Johnson & Johnson had the credo about the only at-scale example you had was J&J. But by and large, most companies, it was wallpaper. Who reads purpose statements or mission statements? But I decided I was going to explore this more. And I came at it from human resources, from marketing. I saw customers expecting more of companies. I saw employees expecting more of companies. I saw stakeholders and regulators expecting more of companies. And suddenly there was something brewing. And as we get into it, I want to tell you why I called it deep purpose and not just purpose.
And why don't you go ahead and tell us that now? Because I found that enlightening in your book.
Well, thank you. So, I love my agent who loves one-word titles of books. He said, like, one-word titles are like great. And so I was going to call it purpose, but I couldn't. Because I found so many companies practicing what I call superficial purpose. The vast majority of us, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because then purpose is just a mission statement. It's an artifact. But if you really go deep with purpose, you can put purpose to work. Purpose unlocks value. Purpose unlocks growth, innovation, change, financial success. So idea that purpose is an unlock only happens when you go deep with purpose. And the bulk of my own talk is around kind of this premise of how do you go deep with purpose to unlock the potential and allows you to put your purpose to work.
And talk to us a little bit about that, because many of us who grew up in corporate America, we understand strategy, we understand implementation, but you're saying purpose can be above it all, and that's how purpose comes to work. Talk to us a little bit about that.
So let's think about it. There are 4 functional benefits of purpose. The first, because people ask, show me the evidence, and you're like, okay, how do I measure company purpose and how do I run a regression against that with financial results? And I'm working on that, but it's not an easy endeavor. But let's think about kind of ways in which purpose unlocks value. The first one we all know, and there's evidence of, is purpose is motivation. People show up to work differently when they're inspired at work. I don't mean satisfied. I don't mean engaged. I mean inspired. So there is a motivational benefit, right, of purpose. So purpose unlocks employee potential. We know that. The second one, which we also understand, is purpose unlocks customer potential. Customers also value company when they're serious about it. Not insincere, shallow, superficial purpose doesn't work. But if you really stand for something, customers also trust you. There was a third unlock, which I called relational potential. That turns out suppliers, partners, ecosystem, that whole thing also unlocks. Because when companies have a strong, deep purpose, it creates transparency. It creates trustworthiness. It creates consistency and predictability. So those are three obvious unlocks. And then there's a fourth one. Purpose creates directional clarity. In times of turbulence, when you have to change things around, you need some kind of a North Star or corridor or anchor or a framework that allows you to take action in the context of that framework. And so those are the four pieces of the puzzle that I wanted to, kind of highlight to you. And I think that's important to kind of keep in mind. So that's, so for me, I realized that purpose has the potential to unlock tremendous value. One leader I talked to in a series of, I just did a podcast on deep purpose with CEOs. And one of the founders of a fast growth venture, he said, purpose is our superpower.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Bring this to life. You have some wonderful examples from CEOs that you've spoken to in the book. Can you share the best examples where purpose has come to life and really is a superpower?
So let's take several examples here. Large companies and small, by the way. Mm-hmm. Right? So let's take a large company example. Probably one of the best is, if you look at Microsoft and what Satya Nadella has done. Satya said, look, when I took over, if you look at the turnaround of Microsoft from the time he took over in 2014, it was about, we needed a new strategy. So he said, Ranjay, we needed a strategy, period. We didn't have one. Next thing, we needed an implementation plan to implement the strategy, which meant changing our organization, changing our culture, changing our people practices, changing our org chart. So I said, wow, textbook. You need a new strategy. You need an implementation plan for strategy. You're done. I get it. And then he said, no, let me pause. We needed to articulate a purpose. And I'm like, in my head, I'm rolling my eyes already thinking, come on. I thought we were having a serious conversation. Now what's happened? And he's like, no. And he saw my skepticism. He's like, Ranjay, you don't understand. Without our purpose, we could not have developed our strategy. Right? We could not have, in any way, done anything with it. So I think it's important to understand that, that he said, listen, purpose was the unlock, because purpose allowed us to implement, it allows to create a rallying cry. And then I said, but then I was skeptical. I said, look at the words in your purpose, I mean, to empower every person, every organization on the planet to achieve more. And he said, Ranjay, purpose is not the purpose statement. The words, you need the words, but purpose is a bigger idea than a set of words. It's the 9 months we spent debating what our purpose should be that is important. It's how we then translate these words into actions, into principles, into metrics, into results. That's purpose. And so that was a really inspiring example. I looked at Gotham Green, which is a small company that makes, lettuce and herbs that are sold at Whole Foods and other places, right? And for them, being an agro business, doing urban farming on urban rooftops was a business idea, but it was also something that they felt that would have an impact, right? 40% of food is wasted in transit. And salads and herbs are highly, high spoilage items. Now, what if you have, like they do in New York City, your farm on the rooftop of Whole Foods? Right?
Right.
How do you think about that? So that's a business idea that comes from having a clear agenda of what you're trying to do. And I have to confess to you, for me, one of the first examples I saw was my own mother's business. which I had to
I
work in
love
as
that.
a kid.
Yeah.
So I mean, I saw this happening, but it was always in pockets. It was not mainstream. I think we're still not at the cusp of mainstream yet, but I think we're getting there.
I agree very much. You talked a little bit too that it's not just businesses, but you talked about the Seattle Seahawks. I thought that brought the concept of purpose to life beautifully.
So let's think about it. What does purpose do for us? So I'll just share an example with you. When I talked to Pete Carroll, the coach of the Seattle Seahawks, and he said, "What do you do, Professor?" I said, "I study unlocking organizational potential." I thought that was a simple enough answer. I said, "What do you do, coach?" He said, I unlock human potential. Because I take players who are competitive athletes, world class, and I show them how they can be even better than they think is possible. That's what I'm here to do. How can I unlock human potential? And he said, so I was intrigued by that idea. And he said, you have to do something. We have to help people discover, first of all, their own life purpose. That's not an easy question to ask anybody, but it's a hard one for a young football player. What are you here for? I'm here to play football. Why are you here to play football? I want to win. Why do you want to win? I want to make money. What else? Why else are you here? Why are you here on this planet? And he said, when people come slowly, it doesn't come easily and doesn't come quickly. When people are grounded in their own personal purpose, and they can connect that in some way to what they're doing at work, that work is allowing them to live their life purpose, magic happens. And it's that intersection of personal with organizational is where that magic happens. And, I'd like to read you a quote from him where he described this to me. And he said, it was really about magic happening. And he said the following to me: there's magic when organizations can inspire people to align their own personal passion, self-understanding, and desire for growth with a common organizational ambition.
Powerful. And it also speaks, there's so many emerging leaders within our network. And I think you've unlocked for them perhaps a secret to their own career, finding the place where they can find their purpose and bring it to life.
Sarah, it's interesting you bring that up. I think there's one horrible phrase in our popular vernacular, and it's called work-life balance.
I agree with you.
Right? Because it implies what? Work is not life. And that's kind of a strange feeling, right? And maybe we all fell into that. In the last 100 years, as we perfected organizations, we created a context where a job is a job and you lived your life. You were living on the weekends and after 5 p.m. and you punched in and punched out. It was an economic exchange. I think work is much more than an economic exchange, right? I mean, we spend so much time at work. Work should also give us meaning. I'm not saying become a workaholic and make work your life purpose. I'm saying work is part of life,
exactly,
not separate from life.
Exactly. And I agree. Yeah. And I think it's about heart, right? It's about heart. And your heart has to be in your work as much as your mind. And that's really where you're going.
So Sarah, the question then is, we all should expect more out of our jobs. I think we have been conditioned into believing that work is a job for a paycheck and don't even expect more. If you can't find it at work, go somewhere else. I think we all owe it to ourselves to be in an environment which brings out the best in us, where we come to work feeling inspired to be there. And I don't mean saving the Amazon. A lot of people go to work for startups because they're inspired to change a market, to blow up the whole world in some way. Not the world, I mean literally, but I mean like I'm Netflix in the early days. I want to change the way entertainment is consumed. I'm not saving lives. I'm not saving a forest. I'm not doing any of that. I'm just changing the way entertainment. It's exciting. I'm energized to be at work. And why is it that we lose it? Something happens as organizations grow and they scale. And I actually wrote an article about this. It's called The Soul of a Startup, where I explored this question. I interviewed 65 fast growth CEOs saying like, hey, what do you lose? What do you mean the good old days? Don't tell me the good old days. I want to know what was the good old days really. But
good. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit for a moment. We have an audience that are terrific storytellers, and the talent in this group always amazes me. And you talked in the book about how important storytelling is to bringing purpose to life. Do you want to share some of your thoughts on that?
yeah. So, purpose is not some kind of change management exercise where you say, oh yeah, let me send a nice email with a video clip attached to it, right? How do you communicate purpose? And I think storytelling, narrative building, what I call in the book, the big story.
Right.
How do you tell those big stories? And you can only tell a big story if it's personal. You need to make it about you, right? I'll just tell you one about myself. Okay, so just to illustrate my own purpose. So for the longest time, when I became an academic, I thought my purpose really was that I am making a positive difference in the world through research. And I'm really a researcher, and my primary focus is my research, and that's what I do. And, teaching is a necessary chore. I have to do that. That's the job part of my work. I go to teach and I do my job, and then I live my work through my research. And about, 15 years ago, I get an email from a former student of mine. I don't recognize this person. I don't know who they are. And they say, I'm coming into town and I want to meet you. So, my meetings are normally 20 to 30 minutes. So he forwarded to my assistant and I said, give him 20 to 30 minutes and fine. It'll be a good meet and greet saying hello. So my assistant comes back to me and says, well, he's asking for more time. In fact, he would rather have lunch with you if he can. And I'm thinking, I'm so busy. I've got to finish these 2 papers and this guy wants to come and have lunch. So I said, can't you avoid that? She says, he's flying into town just to see you. So maybe you might want to have lunch with him. So I'm like, oh, who is this person? I don't know who he is. So I have lunch with him. And my first thing is maybe he wants me to help him with something. So I said, look, I'm here to help. And I want to know, how can I be of help to you? Maybe he's looking for a job or transitioning, or he wants to just bounce something. He said, no, I don't want anything. So I'm like, okay. He says, I just want to tell you, I took your class 10 years ago, and it really transformed the way I thought about myself and what I want to do. And for the last 10 years, I've been promising myself that one day I'm going to come and thank you. And so I'm just here to thank you. I was stunned and I was a little embarrassed and I felt ashamed of myself. But it made me realize that teaching impacts people. Even when you're indifferent. I said, I'm indifferent and it'll make a difference. And imagine if I wasn't indifferent. And it transformed the way I thought about my own purpose. Now, how do we communicate storytelling? And I saw that with amazing CEOs. And there are 3 elements to storytelling that I describe in the book, which come from a work by a professor at the Kennedy School of Government called Marshall Ganz. Marshall Ganz studies social movements. He was a union organizer himself. And his question is, how do people who build movements like unions or other movements, how do they get people on board? And it's all through storytelling. And he said there are 3 aspects of a great story. Self, meaningful to me. It's really important for me. It's part of my story. Us, why should we all think about it together? How are we collectively being impacted by it? And now, why should we do something about it now? Self, us, now. And I think it was really powerful. I give an example of Indra Nooyi, who, when she was CEO of Pepsi, when she was talking about conservation and environment, she talked about her own family and saying, I grew up in lower middle class India, and my mother had to wake up at 4 a.m. every day, 7 days a week, because we only got water in the morning at 4 a.m. for 15 minutes. And we could only fill 4 buckets in that time. Let me tell you why we think about water. So, you suddenly start to discover that ideas are best. We want people to connect at the emotional level. If you want to have emotional resonance, it happens through stories. Intellectual resonance you can do through a lecture and a framework and a little triangle diagram or whatever you want. You want to connect at the heart, you got to tell a great story.
It's funny, in the marketing world, we talk about emotional content, and sometimes we get so hung up in what that means. And you just described emotion is about you and your personal investment in a story. And that's, I think, a great thing for the audience to take away. How do you have people reflect on their investment? The me part of purpose. Yes, it's part of a big organizational change, but the me part has to come through, whether you're the CEO or the guy on the line operating the machinery.
But Sarah, the thing is, it requires a bit of vulnerability. A lot of us back to work, a lot of us kind of like have our guard up a bit. We're not ready to reveal weakness, vulnerability. I mean, I'm telling you the story I just told you. I haven't told that, only started talking about it like about a month ago or 2 months ago. I was embarrassed about it. I was ashamed of myself because my instincts were absolutely, why am I wasting my time with this person? So I think, we have to put ourselves out there a bit. I mean,
right.
in even writing my book, I have to tell you, I'm writing my next book right now, actually. It's already in the works. And, my publisher, whom I have worked with in the last book, she asked me, she says, do you have a personal story in here about you? I'm like, do I? And then I thought, I do, but I don't want to tell it to anybody because I'm the weasel in the story. But I got to talk about it. And I think, it is what it is. And I think it's powerful ideas. People connect to ideas through storytelling. And, when I talk about purpose, I actually show a really compelling video made in India by a company that makes soap, Lifebuoy. And the entire video doesn't talk about the brand, no, nothing. It's about a man walking on his hands. He's doing a handstand. And he's walking through the whole village on his hands. And his legs are dangling up. And then he starts walking up a hill. In between, he stops, but he doesn't sit down. He just rests on his head. So he's on his hands. And then he walks up a little hill on the steps, one by one, and he gets to this temple. And then suddenly his legs come down and he's there. And his son, who's been walking with him all this time, the priest comes out from the temple and he tells the priest, bless us, please. My son just turned 5. And then the question is, what's the big deal about him turning 5? Turns out that village, this is the first child he's had who survived to the age of 5. And this is a village with high mortality rate, and diarrhea and pneumonia kill most of the kids. And hand washing is a very simple way to prevent all that. And so this soap company is adopted all these villages and have taught over 100 million people the habit of hand washing in rural India.
Wow.
Now, what more do you need?
What more do you need? You're right.
So how we create compelling stories that communicate what we do and how it matters. Versus, let me preach my features and functionality and benefits to you and the technology to you.
Exactly. What we do and why it matters. That's the key.
Yeah.
That's the key. So let me shift gears, ask you another question. You're seeing the future of organizational purpose. Where do you think it's heading? What do you think we should expect in the next 3 to 5 years as companies begin to recognize the power, the superpower of purpose as you talk about it?
So first of all, the word purpose has been hijacked, right? It's unfortunately, it's now identified by some people as woke. Oh, purpose, it's woke Inc. And you're like, really? So what do you want to have? No purpose? Or you want to go back to saying our purpose is only shareholder value optimization in the short run? We're a quarterly driven company that only optimizes value for shareholders and we only care about every quarter. We don't care about the long run. And by the way, we don't care about our employees. We don't care about customers. We don't even care about the communities where we choose to operate. And we, of course, don't care about the planet either. We're a great company. People are calling it excellence capitalism. I'm like, excellence? You call that excellence? Really?
Yeah.
And so I find that kind of perplexing. That how, purpose is kind of, so that's one, but there's a school of thought out there trying to put that forward. There are others who say purpose is anything but profit. And you're like, really? So you have the left and the right, everyone hijacking the word purpose. And I think purpose is about intention. It's about your goals. It's about your duties in the short run and the long run. And I think increasingly now, businesses are being held to account for that. That, why are you here is a proxy question. It's really a proxy question to ask you, what's your vision for the future? Long run, short run, for shareholders and other stakeholders. And by the way, you're going to have to make some tough trade-offs and choices.
Right. But profit and purpose can exist together. That's your whole point.
Yeah. And I think, and even the word, the phrase purpose and profit is problematic because it says purpose and profit are separate. And implies there's purpose and there's profit. No, purpose drives profit. I loved Indra Nui's tagline. It was performance with purpose.
It was really good. Yeah.
PWP.
Yep.
As they like to call it.
And it became what the company knew and how the company operated.
Exactly. So back to storytelling, how do you build a really sticky message?
That's right. Good. In the last couple moments we have, what haven't we covered that you would like to leave this audience with?
I think there's a couple of things. I think is to recognize that purpose is not a purpose statement, first of all. We get fixated on the words. Purpose is bigger than a purpose statement. So people say, oh, it's all about getting the right tagline. Get the tagline down and little messaging and sticking it. And I just myself fell into that trap by saying, oh, PWP is so wonderful. I think purpose is bigger than a tagline.
It is, yes.
Right? It's really a philosophy. It's a way of thinking about yourself and the world in which you operate. So I think it's important to understand that. I think the other hard one is, it's great to have purpose up here. It's really hard to bring it down into the bowels of the organization. How do you make it personal? And I think the problem we have there is people won't connect to some company purpose if the individual isn't thinking about their own life purpose. So how do you activate purpose inside people and saying, hey, I want you to think about your own life purpose. And by the way, when you think about it, think about how work fits into your life. And I want to make sure that what we offer you here allows you to connect it somehow to your life. I'm not going to address your life purpose. That's not my job. I can't address your life, but I want to make work a meaningful part of your life. And the CHRO of Microsoft likes to say, Kathleen Hogan likes to say, you don't really work for Microsoft until Microsoft works for you.
Great comment. Great. Good. Any other final thoughts? I mean, I found your book wonderful. I would recommend to everyone, please get a copy and read it. I think it's theoretical, but it's also very pragmatic and very practical. And it is about activating purpose, not just forming purpose.
I would add one more thing. If you're interested, I'm not a podcaster. I don't do podcasts, but I did 10 interviews with 10 amazing leaders from all over the world. And since I had them with me, I put them together into a little podcast series that just launched last week. And it's called Deep Purpose. And they're amazingly inspiring stories. They talk about storytelling. CEOs talking about their own life journey in discovering their purpose and how that unlocked them. And then how that has informed and shaped how they try to think about the organization's purpose. And it's wonderful for me. I found it amazing storytelling, and I was just a witness to capture them talking about their story. And I lucked out. In finding 10 amazing, the founder of Careem, the largest rideshare company in Middle East, Mom's World, the largest women's kind of support system in the Middle East. How do you create that? looking at the CEO of Walgreens. What's going to happen in healthcare, and what's the role of Walgreens in this whole healthcare mess we're in, right? How do we think about that? Ross Brewer. So, I think, so I learned so much from these 10 stories. So you're welcome to grab them. They're out there now for free, anybody to use, to listen to. So just want to share that with everybody as well.
Great. And thank you for joining us. I think your word, your thoughts, they're so inspiring. And I think they create a future of work that's one that so many of us can just feel proud to be a part of and want to help drive forward. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Sarah. It's really a pleasure. I'm really delighted that what you're doing. I think bringing purpose into brand, into value, what do we do? I think is so meaningful. I think we all need to infusing purpose into our products, into our messaging, into our own lives. I think purpose is a huge unlock. And I want to just leave you with that. Purpose unlocks. And I thought, so I'm really excited for all of you. So thank you for inviting me.